Welcome to the English Leap podcast, where we help you master everyday English conversation. I'm Tom, and with me today is my co-host, Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and we're excited to have you join us for today's episode.
Today we're diving into a topic that affects all of us, daily routines. We'll be exploring the vocabulary and expressions you need to talk about your everyday activities.
That's right. Whether you're describing your morning routine, work schedule, or evening activities, we'll cover all the essential phrases you need to sound natural when talking about your daily life.
We've got a great show planned for you, so let's get started. Let's start with mornings. Sarah, I'm curious. What time do you usually wake up on weekdays?
I'm an early bird, Tom. I set my alarm for 6:30 a.m., but I usually hit the snooze button once before getting up at around 6:45.
That's pretty early. You know, a lot of English speakers use phrases like hit the snooze button or sleep in. What's your morning routine like after you get up?
Well, the first thing I do is make my bed. I can't start my day without doing that. Then I head straight to the bathroom to freshen up, brush my teeth, wash my face, that sort of thing.
I'm quite different, actually. I need my morning coffee before I can do anything else. Do you have breakfast right away?
Not immediately. I like to do some light stretching or yoga for about 15 minutes first. Then I'll have breakfast, usually something quick like toast with avocado or a bowl of cereal with fruit.
That sounds really healthy. I've noticed many English speakers use the phrase grab breakfast when they're in a hurry. Like, I just grabbed a quick breakfast before heading out.
Exactly. Speaking of getting ready, what about your morning routine for work? How long does it take you to get ready?
I'd say it takes me about 45 minutes from shower to heading out the door. I've got it down to a science now. Shower, get dressed, pack my bag, and I'm good to go.
That's pretty efficient. You know what's interesting? In English, we often use phrases like running late or rushing around when our morning routine gets disrupted.
Oh yes, like, I was running behind schedule this morning because I overslept. That happens to the best of us.
It sure does. And then there's the morning commute. Do you drive to work or take public transport?
I actually cycle to work when the weather permits. It's a great way to start the day. What about you?
I take the bus. I use that time to catch up on podcasts or do some quick email checks. It's become part of my morning routine now.
Now that we've talked about getting to work, let's discuss what a typical workday looks like. What's your daily routine once you're at the office, Sarah?
Well, the first thing I do is check my schedule for the day. I like to use the phrase touch base with my team during our morning stand-up meeting. It helps us all get on the same page.
That's a great expression. I also catch up on emails first thing in the morning. It's interesting how many workplace expressions we use daily, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like when we say we need to follow up on something or get back to someone about a project. What's your approach to managing tasks throughout the day?
I try to tackle the most challenging tasks in the morning when I'm fresh. I'll often power through my important projects before lunch.
That's smart. I tend to break down my day into smaller chunks. I'll usually focus on one major project for a couple of hours, then switch gears to something else.
Speaking of lunch, do you work through lunch or do you prefer to take a proper break?
I always try to step away from my desk for lunch. It helps me recharge for the afternoon. Though sometimes I have to grab a quick bite between meetings.
I'm the same way. And after lunch, I find it helpful to review my to-do list and prioritize what needs to be done for the rest of the day.
That's a good habit. You know what's challenging? When you have to juggle multiple projects or meet tight deadlines, how do you handle those situations?
I try to stay on top of my workload by blocking out specific times for different tasks, and when things get really busy, I might need to put in some overtime to wrap everything up.
Those are all such common workplace phrases. And what about students? Many of our listeners might be studying rather than working.
Right. Students often talk about hitting the books, cramming for exams, or pulling all-nighters, though we don't recommend that last one.
They also need to keep up with assignments and stay on track with their studies. Time management is crucial whether you're working or studying.
Let's shift gears and talk about what happens after the workday ends. What's your typical evening routine, Sarah?
Well, after I clock out, I usually like to unwind with some exercise. I find it helps me decompress after a long day. What about you, Mike?
I usually head straight home and tackle some household chores first. Loading the dishwasher or putting on a load of laundry, getting those daily tasks out of the way.
That's practical. I tend to save up my household chores for the weekend, except for tidying up the kitchen after dinner. Speaking of dinner, do you cook from scratch or order in?
It depends on how tired I am. I try to whip up something simple most nights, but sometimes I just grab takeout on my way home.
I like to meal prep on Sundays, so I usually just need to heat up my dinner. Then I might catch up on my favorite TV shows or curl up with a good book.
Those are great examples of evening leisure activities. I also enjoy working out, going for an evening walk, or catching up with friends over the phone.
And don't forget about those essential evening tasks like setting out clothes for the next day or packing lunch.
Right. I've found that getting things ready the night before makes mornings much smoother. Do you have any specific evening rituals before bed?
Yes, I try to wind down by avoiding screens an hour before bed. I'll often take a relaxing bath or practice some light stretching.
Those are healthy habits. I usually set my alarm and spend some time planning out the next day before I turn in for the night.
It's interesting how many different phrases we use to describe these everyday activities, like hit the hay or call it a night. Both mean going to bed.
Exactly. And phrases like crash out or drift off for falling asleep. Having a good evening routine really helps you recharge your batteries for the next day.
Now let's talk about how our routines change on weekends. It's quite different from our weekday schedules, isn't it?
Absolutely. The first big difference is that I get to sleep in on weekends. No alarm clock needed.
I know what you mean. Instead of rushing out the door, I like to take my time and have a leisurely breakfast. Sometimes I even treat myself to brunch at a cafe.
That sounds lovely. Weekends are also when I catch up on all those household chores I've been putting off during the week. You know, things like doing a deep clean or running errands.
That sounds lovely. Weekends are also when I catch up on all those household chores I've been putting off during the week. You know, things like doing a deep clean or running errands.
Exactly. And while weekdays are all about sticking to a schedule, weekends are more about going with the flow and playing it by ear.
Cultural differences are interesting too. In some countries, Sundays are strictly for family time, while in others, it's just another day for shopping and activities.
That's true. Here, many people use weekends for running errands or doing the weekly shop. But in some countries, most shops are closed on Sundays.
And let's not forget those weekend phrases like sleeping in, having a lie-in, or lounging around, all perfectly acceptable weekend activities.
Right. Though some people prefer to make the most of their weekends by getting an early start and staying active. Well, we've covered quite a lot about daily routines today. Before we wrap up, let's quickly review some key vocabulary we've learned.
Yes, we've talked about everything from getting up at the crack of dawn to turning in for the night and all the activities in between.
We hope you've picked up useful phrases to describe your own daily routine in English. Remember, practice makes perfect.
And speaking of practice, don't forget to use these phrases in your everyday conversations. Next week, we'll be discussing another exciting topic: weather and seasons.
That's right. We'll explore vocabulary for describing different types of weather and seasonal activities. You won't want to miss it.
Thank you all for listening to English Leap Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends who are learning English.
Thank you all for listening to English Leap Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends who are learning English.